I think, folks, in effort to keep this on time and whatever, we're going to get underway. We are missing a few people. I understand that Chief Andy Thomas is going to join us this morning, so he's probably en route. Welcome to the meeting of May 26th to the Westside Wastewater Treatment and Resource Recovery Select Committee. Do we have any change? We have a couple of business things here on it. First of all, video and microphones. It is being taped here, and so no talking, please, unless we've got in your hands the microphone. So Sandra is there with the portable one for those that don't have the desktop ones up here at council table. So we'll be looking to make sure that happens. I also need to get a motion for allowing a 10-minute presentation to the select committee on the status of the Colwood wastewater and resource recovery. So if I could get that from...
Motion to approve the agenda with the inclusion of the 10-minute presentation.
Seconder? All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. So we'll add that in under the presentations and delegations. Nothing else at this point. Welcome, Chief. We have a spot up front here for you. If you want a coffee or whatever along the way, help yourself. Moving forward, looking for adoption of minutes of the April 7th meeting.
Second.
All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. Adoption as well for April 23rd.
Second.
All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. Chair's remarks. I've already spoken about the video and microphone. And I think that's about all that we have. I didn't get anything passed through to me. And again, welcome everybody for coming and participating in this meeting this morning. Presentations and delegations, I see nothing other than the one we've added. So if those folks could undertake their presentation. Not sure who's starting it off.
That would be me starting it off. Can everybody hear me okay? I guess that's the first item. Okay, if all goes according to plan, this will be about a 10-minute little presentation followed by perhaps up to 10 minutes time for questions about the presentation. The purpose of this presentation, Michael Baxter of the City of Colwood has been heading up a team of consultants to work on what we're calling the Colwood Wastewater Recycling Project. We've been working on this for a few months, and Michael wanted us to share with this group what we've been working on and some of the ideas that we've come up with. This has been kind of a planning process up to date. We haven't got much into the nitty-gritty engineering. That'll be the sort of the next step after this. But we have been working on some concepts or some ideas that are kind of interesting to explore. So first of all, I would like to just briefly introduce the Colwood team, and I know that some of them are here, so if you are here, I'll ask you to stand or wave or do a little dance just so that everybody knows who you are. First of all, probably most of you on this committee already know the City of Colwood's municipal engineer, Michael Baxter. He was kind of heading up this team. Second, we have the Aquatex team, Patrick Lucy and Corey Barraclough. They're over here. And just to tell you a little bit about what each of the members of this team bring to the team, Patrick and Corey, I think, describe themselves as aquatic ecologists, but they also have a lot of expertise in wastewater reuse and resource recovery, and they've helped us sort of focus on looking at the bigger picture of how to reuse wastewater as part of this project. Second, we have the Golder team, Dragan Rukic and Michael Atchov. Dragan is over here. Dragan's expertise is as a wastewater engineer. So he's helped out with a lot of the initial planning for the wastewater design flows. The Payne Engineering Geology, or PEG team, is myself, Michael Payne. I'm a groundwater engineer and hydrogeologist, and my expertise is in soil-based treatment of wastewater. And Ian Ralston is a sub-consultant to my company, and his expertise is also in soil-based treatment of wastewater. And we also have on our team, who's not here, Les McDonald of Spirogyra. He's, I understand, a biologist by training, but he has a lot of expertise in wastewater treatment systems and is a former employee of the Ministry of Environment, so he's helped us out a lot with understanding the regulations, the wastewater regulations, and kind of keeping us focused on making sure that the ideas that we've been exploring are consistent with the wastewater regulations. Now, I'd like to start with what Colwood asked us to do as a team, and I'm calling it the Colwood Tall Order because some of these are more challenges than they are questions. First of all, Colwood wanted to have the highest level of treatment basically achievable. Wanted to have a wastewater treatment plant or plants that produce very high quality wastewater. And the reason for that is to reuse the water for example, irrigation, which is called reuse of reclaimed water. So a big focus of our planning and a focus of this project has been on the idea of reusing reclaimed water in as many ways as we can think of. Part of the objective of that is to either avoid an additional ocean outfall, or if there is an ocean outfall as a backup, to avoid using that ocean outfall as much as possible, and to either reuse reclaimed water or discharge to ground. We also had a focus on identifying options. We had quite a few sort of brainstorming sessions, and the purpose of that was to identify a wider range of options as possible, with the idea that after the planning stage, we'd get into an engineering stage where we would evaluate each of those options and narrow them down. So what about water reuse and the options that we looked at? First, we looked at possible ways to reuse water in the summer, and we identified two main candidates. One is irrigation. So we looked at irrigation of golf courses, irrigation of public parks, and irrigation of boulevards, roadway boulevards, as all being potentially viable options. And we also looked at stream enhancement. That is taking highly treated wastewater, what we call reclaimed water, and discharging it to streams. After some discussion, we sort of zeroed in on the question of direct versus indirect water reuse. For direct water reuse, reclaimed water can be quite easily directly spray irrigated on golf courses, for example. But when we looked at reuse of reclaimed water for stream enhancement, we rethought the whole process and zeroed in on a concept of discharging water into the ground near to streams, so that water would seep through the ground and into the streams, thereby getting additional treatment before it goes into the stream. So we called that indirect stream enhancement. We also looked at the possibility of indirect irrigation, because quite a few of the golf courses use water wells as an irrigation water source. So we looked at the idea of discharging treated wastewater into the ground and then using that to recharge the aquifer, and then the water wells can be used to pull that water back out of the aquifer and use that water to irrigate golf courses. So we kind of tried to look at the whole water system when we looked at these ideas. We also looked at options for water reuse year-round, and I'll explain that funny little diagram in a minute. We looked at aquifer restoration. There's a large aquifer underneath a large portion of the city of Colwood. The Colwood Sand and Gravel is called. And over about the last 100 years, that's actually been depleted, largely as a result of development in the Colwood area. So there's been increases in runoff and a lot less natural recharge or natural infiltration of rainwater into the aquifer. So the aquifer has been depleted, and so one of the ideas is to take treated wastewater, what we call reclaimed water, and discharge that into the ground for aquifer restoration. And this diagram is really just to illustrate that there's several different ways of doing that using either basins or meandering streams or infiltration wells to recharge the aquifer. The second ideas that we've looked at is what some people call waterscapes or landscape water features. So these can actually be water features that are used to beautify the landscape, but instead of just having rainwater going through these features or tap water going through these features, we take reclaimed wastewater. So we reuse reclaimed water to put into these landscape water features, and there could be one or several of those. We also looked at the idea of discharging wastewater effluent to ground, so it could be reclaimed water that we discharge to ground, or we could be talking about effluent that doesn't quite meet all the requirements for reclaimed water. This is just a little diagram showing a perforated pipe that might be used for that type of system. So our wish list for that is we need deep sandy soils, we need one or more large properties, we need a willing owner or owners, and we need groundwater studies to prove that this is a viable concept and that there's no adverse environmental consequences. So I guess we've kind of got through the first two on that wish list during our planning studies. We've confirmed that we have deep sandy soils over some large areas of Cullwood, and we've identified some large properties that are potential candidates, a little bit parallel to what the Westside Select Committee has done with looking at possible locations for treatment plants. We haven't got to steps 3 and 4, confirming that we have willing owners and doing the groundwater studies. So we're kind of partway through that concept. So we sort of proved that it's potentially feasible, but we haven't proven that it's feasible. So the Cullwood proposal as it stands, there's kind of two parts of it. What I call Plan A, which is the plan for reuse of reclaimed water. And the idea is to reuse reclaimed water as much as is feasible. And as long as the wastewater treatment plant can produce reclaimed water, then we'll reuse reclaimed water. Plan B is for the small portion of the time, less than 1% and probably less than 0.1% of the time, when that wastewater treatment plant cannot produce reclaimed water. There needs to be a backup plan, if you like, a plan for emergency discharge. So what we've kind of come up as a scheme is for Plan A, reclaimed water. The idea is that when the effluent is meeting the reclaimed water standards, which essentially means drinking water standards. It's not really suitable for drinking, but it meets drinking water standards. So for this reclaimed water coming out of the treatment plant, the first priority is direct reuse of reclaimed water. So for example, spray irrigation would be an example of direct reuse of reclaimed water. If that's not feasible, or if we've run out of options for spray irrigation, which might happen, for example, in the winter, the next option is indirect reuse of reclaimed water for aquifer recharge. So that might be using drain fields or infiltration basins, meandering streams. Another option is actually wetlands that are constructed wetlands that are combined with infiltration basins. So lots of different ways of doing that. And then the third, if necessary, is to discharge that reclaimed water to drain fields if we run out of options 1 and option 2. Then we have our Plan B, which is for those rare circumstances where the wastewater treatment plant does not meet reclaimed water standards. The first priority would be to discharge the water to ground using drain fields. That can be done with a wide range, can be done safely and efficiently with a wide range of different effluent qualities, so we don't need reclaimed water in order to discharge to ground. And then the second option, if that's not available, is to discharge to the ocean using a new outfall if necessary, preferably using an existing outfall. And again, as I say, this is something that would be rarely, if ever, followed, but is necessary as a backup or emergency measure. So that's kind of the Plan B. So just to sort of summarize what we've found during the last few months of sort of brainstorming and head scratching, and what are our next steps. We have options for reusing reclaimed water. We've identified quite a few potential options. So, provided that we have willing users of reclaimed water, there's potential to use all of the generated wastewater in a reuse fashion, to reuse all of that reclaimed water within Colwood, at least for a Colwood plant, and possibly even for a larger plant, say, for example, Colwood plus Langford, because there's plenty of land that needs to be irrigated. Ground discharge is an option in Colwood. We've pretty much confirmed that. We just haven't confirmed how much ground discharge is feasible. These are all methods that have been used elsewhere, so although we've developed some ideas that we think are useful and perhaps even a little bit creative for Colwood, they're all based on ideas that have been used elsewhere, particularly down in the southwestern U.S. where they have water shortages and they really have no choice but to use these approaches. And I guess because of the types of ideas we've been looking at, we feel this can lead to a robust and an adaptable approach for the future, because we would be, this approach leads to potentially 2 or more wastewater treatment plants, potentially a wide range of wastewater reuses, reuse of reclaimed water in a number of different areas, and also leads to the potential for 2 or more different locations for ground discharge. So what you have is an adaptable system that's sort of flexible and can adjust with the times, and also has the ability to sort of be future-proof against some of the effects of global warming. So that's one of the advantages of some of the advantages of the ideas that we've been talking about. Our next step basically is the nitty-gritty feasibility studies for each of these ideas. And really, we've identified a number of different options for ground discharge of wastewater and for reusing reclaimed water. And we need to look at each of those separately and in detail to see how feasible they would be. So that is the end of the short presentation. I haven't been timing, but I'm hopeful that that was under the 10 minutes. And we've got the team here, so we're open for any questions from the committee at this point.
Thank you for the presentation. What is your time frame to complete the rest of your study?
That's a good question. I'm not sure if we have a clear time frame. Michael, I don't know if you want to expand on that.
Yeah, they will be finished, the study that they've been engaged to do so far, very soon, sometime next month, I would imagine. But the next stage I'll be taking to council next month as well, and we'll need approvals on that before we go forward.
Thank you. And does this is this going to be something that could potentially come to Westside as part of our process, or is this to continue to remain separate?
Really, we're just waiting for the Westside process to reach the point where it would start to consider this information, and then we'd be happy to see it incorporated.
Yeah, if I can, I'll just add a little bit of a short extra comment about the timing for these ideas. One of the things that's different about what we're looking at in Colwood versus what they're looking at in a lot of other communities is because Colwood has some deep sands and gravel deposits underneath a good part of the property. We've looked pretty seriously at the idea of discharging treated wastewater into the ground as part of the overall scheme. So it's a little bit different. But it's also something that there's no rush to move forward on, so that if it takes us some time to negotiate access to some properties, investigate those properties, prove that they're feasible, that part of the equation can be added in later, so that I think there were kind of 3 steps. It kind of was in the middle of the 3 steps. You can kind of skip from step 1 to step 3 in the interim until the step 2 discharge to ground is available. So we've got a little bit of time on our hands for the discharge to ground part, as long as we're moving ahead with all of the other components of it.
Thank you, Chair. I've got two quick questions. One is, where is Colwood with respect to the groundwater discharge and the MOE? And the second question is there a business case at this point from your perspective for the water reuse end of the project, or am I ahead of myself here?
Well, I'll see if I can give you a general answer to the second part of the question. Second question, I may need to get a clarification on the first part, but I'll just keep my answers general. Business case, there's no detailed business case, but I've looked at other communities where they've used similar ideas. And what tends to happen is this. During the planning stages, it's more expensive because it's a more complicated system. There's lots of components, so there's more planning that goes in, so there's more money spent during the planning and engineering stage. The cost of building all the infrastructure tends to be quite comparable because there's some additional infrastructure that's required for this type of approach, but you can also save on some of the infrastructure, particularly if we have, for example, a system with more treatment plants, which means less distances between where we're collecting the wastewater and where it's going after it's being treated, and it's also more compatible with continued use of on-site sewage systems. So overall, the experience in other communities has been the cost of what's constructing what goes in the ground is comparable, more or less the same as a more conventional system. The cost savings where they do occur are more down the road in the future because you're reusing water, and you've got a system that's more robust, which means you can adjust it down the road. So that's just a very general answer. We don't have a detailed business case. And I'm afraid I didn't completely understand the first question. There may be one for somebody else in our group.
Sure. My understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong, that's highly possible, is that you need to get approval from the Ministry of the Environment to be able to discharge rather than use an outfall. And I just wondered where Colwood was in that process and how that would impact both East and West Side processes.
Well, I think the short answer is we do not have approvals yet, and we're now ready to start talking to Ministry of Environment about these ideas to confirm. We do have two people on the team that are very familiar with the municipal wastewater regulation. So we have a good idea of what's required, but we've actually come up with some ideas that are probably a little bit new as far as the Ministry of Environment is concerned, so we have to kind of run those past them and see if they're okay with it. And I don't know if anybody else wants
But this is happening in other parts of the world, correct? You're reusing wastewater. This isn't new. So I guess really what we're looking at is this is an option for us when we're actually siting. We haven't picked a site yet, and neither has Colwood, I wouldn't assume yet. We're not there yet. But when we do pick a site, maybe this is something you look at and you just say, okay, well, this site makes more sense than the other one because we actually have a reuse of water close to that site. But if you're going to pipe it for millions of dollars to go use the water somewhere where there's gravel and it's at McLaughlin or somewhere, you're not going to do that. So I guess it's a financial decision in the end, and hopefully you can incorporate, it would just be maybe a criteria that we should be aware of when we're selecting sites that, hey, reuse of water is kind of a good thing to do, and if it's possible, then we do that. It doesn't matter whether it's in Colwood or even in this whole regional east side, west side. So just to simplify it, it's done everywhere else or other places. Show the examples, and then when we site our new wastewater treatment plant or plants, wherever they go, we just look at that as an option, and then you guys have done a little bit of work to share with the group. That's fine, because that makes sense. But yeah, we're a little bit ahead, I guess, with this because we haven't got a site yet. Or we did have one, but we don't have one now. So I guess that's really where we're at.
Yeah, that's
Okay.
why we're pleased to have this information coming forward
Now.
at about the right time, because it will help when the Westside team gets down to, you know, the fine details of site selection.
Right.
Just one additional comment here.
Yeah, you raise an extremely good point, and there's an excellent example in Sarasota, Florida, down in the Keys, where they had an old, aging infrastructure. It needed to be replaced. It was a single, large, centralized plant. Big population increase, projected population increase. Standard approach is rebuild the old plant but double its size. But given all of the changes that they're facing as a result of a changing climate, they asked a very different question. They said, what are the kinds of conditions we're going to have to adapt to in 10, 20, 30, 40 years? And is there an alternate design, excuse me, that would give us a much higher degree of resilience to changes we're not yet experiencing? Mm-hmm. What they've opted for are 4 or 5 decentralized or distributed plants, and they're going to start thinking with actually designing a way of rethinking their municipal infrastructure. So they're going to end up reclaiming not just water, but energy, chemicals, gases, and that is going to include biosolid cogeneration with solid waste to recover energy, because one of the things that they need after they've had a hurricane is an on-site energy supply that's not tied to the grid. So just phrasing the question differently, they've literally come up with a very different approach. And that's the kind of thing that we're talking about, is how do we think about which site to choose, not based on whether it's more or less expensive, but what are the benefits that accrue from one site that you can't achieve from another?
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. I don't have a question, but I would like to make a suggestion to the committee that we reference this down to Core Area Liquid Waste Committee for a presentation, as both Eastside and Westside are at a place now where we're seeing and hearing different opportunities. I think it would be of value. So I would strongly encourage a presentation down there. And if it's a motion that you require to do that, I will move that this presentation be sent down to Core Area.
Seconder?
I'll second it.
Stu? All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. I think if we're finished questions, one of the things that I wanted to ask of the team, has there been any direct involvement or visitation to the Mill Springs wastewater treatment plant up in Mill Bay that does presently have one of the few certifications that to go to ground on their water through the Ministry of Environment?
Well, briefly, and maybe some of the other team might have some additional comments. We haven't included that as part of our deliberations as a project team. In other words, we haven't gone up there as a team to have a look at it. Mm-hmm. I'm somewhat familiar with that system, and I've done a little bit of work in association with it, so I know a little bit about it, and that is part of the information, I guess, or background knowledge that we're using to put together these ideas, and I guess partly to convince ourselves that what we're proposing is actually feasible or doable.
Mm-hmm. Good, thank you. No further questions. Thank you very much for your presentation. I have had a request from one of our attendees. Mayor Helps does have another engagement to get off to, so she's asked the indulgence of the committee to move the verbal update of Eastside Select Committee from 5.5 up to 5.1, which would happen right now. So
moved.
Seconder, please.
Second.
All those in favor? Opposed? Mayor Helps.
Thank you. I also promised that I would be brief, and I'll be heading out at 11:30. So the East Side met last week and hashed out in great detail the 2 sets of terms of reference that the West Side will be looking at today. Hopefully we've made some improvements that can be further improved upon by this committee today. And I look forward as chair of the Core Area Committee to getting these to our table tomorrow, getting them approved, and then moving forward. The East Side, for anyone who's a real wastewater nerd and wants to spend a weekend looking at sites not in your own municipalities, we're having 2 events this weekend from 10 until 4 on Saturday and 10 until 4 on Sunday. Saturday's at the University of Victoria. Sunday is at the Victoria Conference Centre. As most of you are well aware, the East Side has released 40 sites and site profiles, and we'll be asking our residents to roll up their sleeves with us and a group of our engineers from Urban Systems, and to help us at the East Side figure out how are we going to narrow this list of, it's actually 38, down to 6 or 8 sites, and then we'll be taking that input that we've received back to the public for further consideration. We do look forward to working with the Westside to bringing these two processes together, hopefully by the end of June, so that over the summer, the consultants that we hire coming out of these terms of reference today can get to work and start costing the solutions and doing the analysis that we need to keep this moving. So that's all from me. Happy to entertain questions if there are any, and thanks for welcoming me to your hall today, Mayor Hamilton.
Any questions for Mayor Helps? Seeing none, thank you for attending. Then moving on to terms of reference and recruitment on the technical oversight panel.
Yes, Chair. These are terms of reference for a panel of experts that would report directly to the Core Area Liquid Waste Committee, essentially providing oversight on the technical analysis that's going to be taking place over the summer and into September, and supporting the committee as they work through looking at their options and making some decisions that would inform a liquid waste management plan amendment. So we do have Pitt and Forrest Madden out recruiting for these folks as we speak now. The terms of reference, more specifically, are attached to the staff report in Appendix B, and as Director Helps has just said, this was at the Eastside Select Committee last week. You do have a redlined version in Appendix B that's been attached for those folks on Granicus on iPads and was circulated yesterday, so you can see in red the changes that were made by the Eastside Select Committee. I can certainly answer any questions, and whatever comes out of today we'll further update and have for the core area tomorrow.
Open to table. Mayor Desjardins.
Thank you, Chair. Under the terms of reference, Appendix B, the selection criteria skill set sought, item 3, resource recovery. And it speaks about district energy systems, energy conversion systems, and other community benefits. And I'm just wanting to ensure that that's inclusive of all of the technologies that we have had circling around our tables, gasification amongst those, because I recall in the last go-around that we ended up somehow restricted by our language, and so I really want to make sure that we're as broad as possible in our language.
Yes, through the chair. So that, as you can see, was an edit that came through the Eastside Select Committee, I think, to be more broad than just biogas and biofuels. We could itemize after energy conversion systems and other community benefits with a long list. I certainly understand what it's intended, but if we need to be more explicit, we can do that. I have talked to Pitt and Forrest Madden about gasification being one of the intents behind that edit.
Okay, thank you. And just a follow-up to that, as I've run through the terms of reference, this one and then the next report, we need some consistency in that language. At some point, we list out syngas, struvite, blah, blah, blah. And at other times we use this terminology. So as we go through those documents, again, this is probably for tomorrow more than anything, we need to look at it in terms of being consistent with the language. I have another question, but I'll leave it till the next, if others want to speak.
Councillor Crum.
Thank you, Chair. I went over this and I realized that if I was looking through the triple bottom line, the piece that's missing is the social impact. And I think that's a big part of what went off the rails with the original project. So I would be hoping that we would be including someone who has the skill set to ensure social capital, and the notion that the public is brought alongside and also uses IAP2 criteria to do their public engagement. Thanks.
Mayor Screech.
Thank you. A general observation would be, and I'm not sure how to phrase this properly, but I mean, I think all the talk of optimizing resource recovery, et cetera, is all wonderful, but I'd like to see equally strong language about budgets and business cases. And I really don't see that in here, that, you know, we need to be able to prove without shadow of a doubt to our taxpayers that this is good value. And I don't see it. And under the background, the second paragraph really worries me. While the participants in this service may not have similar ultimate objectives and may either individually or as subgroups pursue options that have different approaches, timelines, I don't understand that. I mean, we're all here because we've been mandated to get our sewage treated. So I just wonder if someone could explain to me that paragraph.
Through the chair, I think it's understood that we have two different public consultation processes underway, and there may be different outcomes that come out of those processes that would take solution sets for Westside and Eastside in slightly different directions, and we're just being open to that flexibility in the regional system that we come forward with.
I think if I can follow up on that, I mean,
Yes,
it really...
absolutely. I just want to be sure that you're on the technical oversight terms of reference.
Oh,
or the
I'm
next
sorry.
one. just so that we're in
Okay.
context of the
Nope,
conversation.
sorry. Okay, I can wait.
Any further questions, though, on that one? Okay, so we'll just back up a bit there and
Yes, thank you, Chair. If I could have formal motions for any changes that committee would like to see to these so that we've got it really clear. So, for example, Alternate Director Beth Curtin-Cron's comment about social capital, if you would like to see something formal here, if we could maybe pass a motion for that.
okay.
Okay, so the wording would be to ensure that the skill set sought included the ability to get social capital on the project and a history of using the IAP2 public engagement criteria to ensure that.
And I will make that motion as I'm the sitting person at the table.
Do we have a seconder on the motion? Discussion, Mayor Helps?
Yeah, I support the social capital, but the IAP2 is confusing because this group is not going to be doing public engagement. So I think we should scrap that because it just creates confusion.
I can modify it.
Yeah, okay.
Thank you. Thanks for the input.
We have a motion and a seconder in place. Do we have to vote that then in that regard? So any other comments or questions? Call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion, I'm stuck here. I didn't see enough hands up here. Yours went up in favor.
In favor.
And no one else raised hands anywhere, so it passes, that it stays on the...
That it goes on.
It goes on? All right. So you have your motion, staff? Good. Anything further to this particular item then?
Yes.
Mayor Desjardins?
Thank you. I'll put my idea out first, and then I'll capture it in a motion. Under selection criteria, skills set sought, I'm wondering whether we need, and I don't know what the actual person's profession would be, but do we need to include a climate change adaptation expertise? And the reason I put that forward under this skill set sought is that allows us that forward thinking in terms of how are we going to mitigate for the future as opposed to what meets today's minimum standard. So I'd like to make a motion that we include a climate change adaptation expertise into the skill set that are sought.
Seconder?
Is there a seconder to my motion? You can. You can.
For discussion, I will then second it. Discussion? Explanation?
Again, I just think that we are looking toward the future, and to have a critical understanding of what some of the challenges will be won't necessarily increase cost, but may save us a lot as we go forward. And so having that body of knowledge as we review now ensures that we do not miss a stone that we need to turn over. Thanks.
Councillor?
Is it fair to say that you're just wanting to make explicit something that may well be implicit, and we are making assumptions that people are looking with that lens, but you're just wanting to bring that out?
Yes, it's not necessarily to add another body or to create a specific, one of those specific bodies to that. But I really want to make sure, as I said before, that it was the language and the limitation of the language last time that I feel did not help us to really gather a fulsome amount of information going forward the first round. And I'd like to ensure that we create that broad ability to bring in whatever kind of expertise is needed, so that we're going to be proud of this project, and this project is going to live for going forward, that we're not going to be looking in 15 years at, we need to make significant changes and that's going to cost again. So this is just providing that extra understanding of focus.
Any other comments? Discussion? Mayor Screech?
Thank you. Now that I'm in the right place on the agenda, I think it's somewhat redundant. I mean, we have sort of generalized skill sets here, understanding of innovative emerging best practice. So if we're going to start specifying what those skill sets have to be beneath that, then we wouldn't just start with climate change. We would have a listing of many others. So I personally think it's redundant to start putting specific skill sets in. I mean, I would hope that it is encapsulated in number 2 and 3 already.
Any further discussion? Comments?
Just to say that I'm hearing support, but what I'm hearing is it's not a necessary comment to add. So the commentary allows, I would like the motion to go forward anyways, but defeating this motion does not necessarily say that we're not being inclusive of this information. And I'll bring it forward again tomorrow to the core area. Thank you.
Call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? 2, 3?
I'm in.
You're opposed, or
No, I'm
you're
for
in?
it.
So 3, 2.
Move on.
Okay.
As long as it's
motion.
not a new position, we're fine.
Yeah.
Do it as part of what we're doing.
Motion carries then. So we've had the 2 additions to that. Anything else? Anything further? So we do have a recommendation that with the amendments, the Westside Select Committee endorse the terms of reference for the Technical Oversight Panel and be forwarded to core area liquid waste. So we need that to go forward.
I will move that.
Seconder, please. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. Next item. Oh, geez. Hold on, folks. Bombed me right out of there. If anybody does or is looking for Wi-Fi, the Colwood Public does not need passwords on there, so you should be able to get in right away on it. Moving then on to the next item, terms of reference, independent engineering and financial analysis beyond June 2015.
Yes, thank you, Chair. This is terms of reference for engineering and financial analysis of options that come forward from the Select Committee processes that will be undertaken in the summertime. I do want to acknowledge Director Hamilton and Jeff Miller, Jazz Paul, and Director Derman. We worked together on a working group to pull these terms of reference together. They have been reviewed by the Eastside Select Committee, and their comments are redlined in this version. Just a point of clarification that principals from the Core Area Committee, the Westside and Eastside Select Committees encompass a broad approach to how we're going to undertake the process and the project, and a number of those principles speak to how we're going to engage the public and how we're going to work together as participants. And that was creating a little bit of confusion for Eastside Select Committee members because, of course, this work, these consultants are not going to be actually directly doing that work. So we may want to talk about how we ensure that those principles are not perceived to have been deleted. We also have had a number of comments that have come in from the Westside CAOs, so there are a number of comments within the staff report that speak to concerns there, and maybe I'll leave it for the Westside CAOs to speak to those to committee directly. And then the other piece that has been added as well is Appendix C that's appended to this staff report, which essentially lays out the roles and responsibilities of the Core Area Committee versus the Westside Committee and municipal staff versus CRD staff moving forward. So that's just, I think, here for some initial discussion. So I'll just turn it over for questions if there are any.
Mayor Desjardins?
Thank you. Just starting out with the report on page 1 of 3, background. I'm not clear, so that this is really why I'm asking these questions. It talks on the end of the second paragraph. It talks about the upcoming 2 months. Each select committee is conducting public consultation process in the upcoming 2 months. I'm hopeful that you're suggesting that was May and June.
That's correct.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you, because it speaks to the concern that we're hearing from Westside staff. My second question is around the draft terms of reference, which is at the bottom of that page. And I noticed that we have determined in some way that we will anticipate that up to 4 discrete system options, 2 from each select committee, would be analyzed. And I hadn't realized that we had made some decisions around the fact that it would be 2 of each side.
Yep. So the working group was talking about how do we put some constraints around the timelines and the budget for the work moving forward. And so I think with the budget proposed at $250,000, and that may still be quite light, that would be aligned with 2 options coming forward from each side. If there's going to be more than that, we'll have to reevaluate how long that analysis is going to take and how much it's going to take to do it. So that's there for some discussion. And of course, we're in a little bit of a disadvantage because this process from the select committees hasn't concluded, and we're trying to write terms of reference, anticipating what those options are going to be. So it is a little bit of chicken and egg, admittedly.
Okay, thank you. So what I'm hearing is it's part of a budget
that's right.
Number that's been put forward as well. So
we likely have some flexibility once we're into it, and it's understood that the consultants that are working on this will synthesize and make best use of the options that come forward. So there may be some mixing and matching within the options that go forward, but we're not trying to get too far out in front of that and over-prescribe that without knowing what those options really look like at this point.
Okay. My final comment on this report is that there are 3 very specific concerns that are being put forward by the Westside staff. And I'm wanting to figure out how we accommodate those within our process such that they are integral to the process. We know that this is significant in terms of public assurance and trust, that each process is allowed to be fulsome, and we have benefited so much by having our staff provide us with this ongoing information that I don't want to lose that ability as we go forward. So municipal staff involvement, as well the idea of consultation through the summer. Esquimalt is well versed in that and the difficulties of it, and so we can really provide you with good input that it's not the best way to do business to do it in the summer in terms of public consultation, and then the allocation concern. So I just want ask you, Larissa, if you have some thoughts as to how we can formulate that. I've actually gone later on, and I think I might have a motion to bring forward,
Sure.
but if you have some thought as to how it can
Sure.
get included, it would be helpful.
We did have a good meeting, the Westside CAOs and myself, with regards to when these comments were coming forward. And I don't see that any public consultation is happening over summer. I think Christine Houghton would support that. So I think we're okay with the first item. I think we're just moving forward the comments as they came in, so that we're transparently reflecting them, so that we know where we're at with that. Did you want to add something, Christine?
I just want to say no active consultation, but what we had talked about was continuing to release information to the public, so we don't go dark over July and August, but we're not out there actively trying to have big events or things like that. So,
Okay, thank you.
Yep. On the second item, with regards to municipal staff involvement, where we've got a reflection of that currently is on page 9 of the terms of reference. So there's an allowance there for the consultant to present to council and to committee meetings, to present the draft report and recommendations to both CRD and municipal staff, and a final meeting with all municipal participants in CRD and municipal staff to discuss the draft report prior to completion. So we do have allowances to bring the municipal staff into the process. At this point, there is no overarching steering committee, because of course we've got the technical oversight panel that's really providing the detailed direction on this work. So I can take comments with regards to how we might enhance municipal involvement over and above what we've got here.
Do you want me to continue?
Yep. But before you get to any motion, I'd just like to leave opportunity for the representative from CAOs if they have any comment or point that doesn't get covered.
I certainly support under the page 9, as you said, the need to build in the role of municipal staff and expectations of connections by the proponents. So under the meetings, there should be a section there, and I'll bring forward a motion after, to ensure that they do have a meeting with the municipal staff. And whether it be Eastside and Westside together, or whether it's just Westside and separately Eastside, it's that allowance to have our municipal staff come into the process and provide input there. I also will add to that I'll come back to page 2 of 11, and under item 10, that it might be suitable to add a section F, that the technical and engineering panel will continue to liaison and work with municipal staffing groups to ensure community input and support for the process as they go forward. And so after we hear from staff, I will add those two as a motion.
Okay. And then the third item on budget, I think that comes back to my comments with regards to how many solution sets are moving into the detailed analysis. So at this point, I think the 250,000 is about as light as we can go, anticipating 2 solution sets per select committee. But if we get to a larger number of solution sets and we want a lot more flexibility moving into the summer, I think we'll have to allow for that, and perhaps have the flexibility within our documents to engage in more work, and appreciate that may take more time than the end of September. So.
Okay. Opportunity for staff to cover off on anything if required. Mr. Nason, are you spokesperson for?
Well, Madam Chair, the CAOs have had a number of discussions with respect to any concerns we have with respect to the process and the timelines. We have a number of concerns with respect to the timelines from here to the end of the year, but focusing in specifically within sort of the parameters of the terms of reference for this particular study. I think that our main concern, and we have managed to clarify with CRD staff, the nature and extent of any public engagement during July and August, and I think we've clarified that. But we do have a concern about the nature and extent and timing of any public engagement in September, given the fact that the deadline for submission of this report is the end of September. So if there's an expectation that there's going to be public engagement and consultation on the work that's being done and input feeding into the finalization of that report, that timeline as set out right now for September would be extremely challenging. So we have a concern about how that would work and the optics around that. But that's a specific concern related to this terms of reference. We have others.
Any further comments? Mayor Desjardins?
Well, I will put forward my motion, which is to ensure inclusion of our municipal staff, that under item 10F, page 2 of 11, terms of reference, that the technical and independent engineering group will continue to liaise and work with municipal staff groups, and that be also included on page 9 under meetings, that meetings would be included in that list as part of their terms of reference. And I would also, maybe I'll stop there, and then I have a separate motion with regards to the CAO's concerns.
Seconder for discussion? Second. Discussion? Everything? Call question? No. Oh, pardon me, Chief?
I guess, are we talking about this this paper here in terms of reference? Excuse me. I have to apologize for walking in late and not taking part in the discussions so far, but I was reading through this document here, and I see a lot of areas that have been, I don't know if they've been suggested and then scratched off in regards to engaging in consulting with the Westside residents and First Nations. Are we scratched off the consulting part there? Ensuring public engagement, meaningful and pragmatic. Support for rapid consultation. And I think one of the other ones was undertake a fair and transparent process. And I see that scratched off. The other part that I see, when it comes down to the costs and everything else, we've always been kind of left out of this process here, and I used to bring it up with the CRD and CTERA when they're coming around, supposed to be consulting with us, but they came in and laid out all their paperwork and said, this is it. There was no consultation. But I always expressed that, for our nation there, we need to be involved right from the beginning. We need to be able to have some funding to do our due diligence, and I think, and I don't know where you plug that into here, and I still kind of feel on the outside yet. Before Christmas, I was saying that, we were supposed to, somebody was supposed to come to Esquimalt and Songhees and invite us both to one of these tables. So nobody came yet, so I've been sitting on the outside, and I thought I better come and say a few words anyway, about our nations, and I think Songhees, their administrator, is off with the flu, and I thank Barb for inviting me here today, and I thought I better come and find out where everything's at, because you guys are busy making motions there, and I see First Nations being scratched off and consultations and everything else, and so if it heads that way, it's going to be the same thing CTERA did with us. we won't have any resources to be able to do our own due diligence, to be able to plug into this process here. I think so. We need to have those parts in here if we're going to play a meaningful part in this process here, because CRD has made a lot of decisions that have affected us, and it's blocked a lot of our ability to be able to do any economic development. I mean, we face a lot of barriers, and we need to be part of this stuff here. Maybe we'll use some of your staff because we don't have that capacity in our own office. We don't have engineers, we don't have planners. So maybe we'll plug into one of your offices there. I don't know how this will work out, but we need that opportunity to be able to find out. So I just needed to say these few words, and thank you again for inviting me here today.
Thank you, Chief. Mayor Desjardins.
Thanks, Chief Thomas. I want to be able to address your concerns with respect to what's being crossed out, and I know that Larissa will, but if we can call the question on this motion, then I think we should answer those questions, because I think there's a misunderstanding around those crossing outs. So I'm looking for the question.
Was there any further discussion then on the motion before us? Call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. And now if we can address the red lines.
So if I might just make a comment, I was at the Eastside meeting, and so the red lines have been sections that the Eastside Committee has looked at and said, these don't fall within the specific mandate of this group that we're hiring. I think in looking at it and reading it through now for our committee, I think that it's been taken out of context, because that information is from our terms of reference and cannot be deleted in any way, shape, or form. It's from their terms of reference, it's from our terms of reference. And so I think that it has to go back to the Eastside Committee for that understanding that they're speaking to this group, but those are just lines coming from documents we have already approved. And I'll turn to Larissa for further information.
I think what might be a solution for tomorrow's core meeting is to have those principles around engagement and collaboration, working with First Nations, reinstated into these terms of reference with a really clear line that the consultant that we're hiring is not responsible to do the public engagement with the First Nations and so forth. I think for the Eastside directors it was really confusing at the time, but admittedly now that we see that they're crossed out, it's sending the wrong message that we're not doing these things, and most certainly they're probably the most important principles that we establish, at the Select Committees established. So we can do that for tomorrow.
And will it identify who will be following up and doing those?
I think we'll say that the Select Committee and the Core Area Committee, as part of delivering their processes, working with other consulting firms and staff and so forth, will be executing on the public consultation pieces of the work.
Okay. Mayor Young?
That was my question, but yeah, striking this out and then providing this here, obviously for somebody new coming in.
Yeah.
Well, let's pretend the chief is the public now, because he's come in now, and now you read this, you're going to have this document circulated out there, and now you're going to take a lot more flack, and that's the problem with the CRD. Is we got to figure out who's delivering these messages, as you said. So my suggestion is that everybody has to be part of the process. I think that this is actually part of who we're dealing with. Can you guys hear me out there? Hey. Anyway, so I guess my point is that these should all be in there anyway as guiding principles on everything that we're doing here. These all make sense. And I'm not taking it out here. And I suggest that we put it all back in, send it back to the Eastside Committee and say, This is actually the principles of being a politician, being a servant, and a person that's serving the public and providing information. You cross these out anywhere and then try and stick it somewhere else. That's wrong. This is where the process has failed in the past. So these are actually guiding principles for staff, for politicians, for everybody, and I don't think that anything should be crossed off here. It doesn't matter. It's part of every single process we do publicly. So let's just leave everything in there. We're splitting hairs now. Just make sure. And the other part is when you hire these consultants, they are part of the public. They will be engaging the public, and they should be at our meetings. And, you know, these are things that we need to talk about, because when you're paying CTERA $170,000, I want them here at the table now, too. I want to see what I'm doing with my money. This is another thing. We start to separate everybody out into all these different categories. We're not really working as a team or a unit. So we need to make sure that moving forward, anybody we hire is here in the public with us. And I want them sitting there, just like I would at a council meeting when I want to refer to something. I don't go, I'll get back to you later. Well, these meetings are not through the summer. They start in September. This process has to be hired, continued, and they got to be at every meeting. And I'd like to suggest that we look at anybody getting paid on sewage treatment by our taxpayers in Langford, Colwood, View Oral, or Saanich or Victoria. Anybody getting paid. There better be a staff member here or a consultant here or somebody here to hear what we're doing. Because I don't want to take information like this, send it off to somebody, and they misinterpret actually their job. But their job is to actually consult, engage, and be part of the process. And I think it's just imperative that we do that. This is where we fail. Everybody starts to say, well, that's not my job. I'm going to just look after this part. I don't have to engage the public, but you're actually making decisions on money. And I go to this report. Oh, that's in camera, but I can't. But anyway, I go to the scenario of where it says you're going to spend all this money when you hire these consultants, and then they say no politicians, no this, no that. The rules that we can't even engage or be part of it. We can't even be part of the consultation process when we're starting to move forward, when actually taxpayers' money are expended. And that's the bigger picture here, and I think that we're all starting to see this, and we need to move forward. So I think, Larissa, if you can just explain that,
Yep.
That's the job of everybody. So this actually doesn't hurt it to be in there. So it's not confusing to me at all, because I think that hiring people for consulting, all of us aren't experts. I actually need them here, and CTERA should be here, and all these people should be at least here at the meeting so we can refer questions to her if the public stands up. Because it's almost like we're spending all this money on these consultants and they're over here, and yet we have to answer to the public, and I may not have the right answer. And I don't like reading in the paper what I've heard lately. $30 million for Craigflower Pump Station has been out in the public 2 times by the chair and by Judy Brownoff and everybody else. And then they say, like, all this misinformation out there is incorrect. So if the consultant's here, they can answer directly that a $12.5 million pump station is not $30 million. So I'm going to move on this, but I'm just telling you right now, I think you need to leave all that stuff in there, and we need to have everybody engaged in the process. That's part of our problem.
Thank you.
We'll put it back in.
I'm seeing Chief, so I'll go there just because it's a follow-up there, and then I have, you're okay?
I just wanted to, I hear a lot of people talking around the table about, keeping an eye on taxpayers' money. I think everybody feels that we don't pay our taxes, but every time we step off our reserve, we pay taxes. Anytime we have a lease on our land, they tax that company that's on our land. So a lot of taxes have left our lands into this table here, and we never see anything come back this way. So I think I wanted to just put something in there in regards to, we're taxpayers too. I think and whether it's in Esquimalt or clear across Canada, the First Nations pay taxes clear across this country, unless we got malls and everything else on our reserves. But even those are being taxed by the nations themselves now. So need to get rid of that kind of language. Because to me it's offensive. Because we do pay taxes. And I just wanted to say that about any work that we do together. Thank you.
Thank you. Mayor Desjardins? No, David first? Okay. Mayor Screech?
Thank you. So my understanding is on the agenda, we're now on 5.2, the terms of reference.
Yes.
Correct me if I'm wrong about that.
We are.
Thank you. So I won't repeat my earlier comment, but I mean, I really do have an overall concern that there's not enough in here about costs, budgets. There's far more about resource recovery, optimizing, et cetera, which, as I've said, I think is great. But I mean, at the end of the day, we have to be able to see that there's a business case that supports doing that. And it really worries me that it's not strong enough in here. And I will repeat the concern I have with the background. I do not understand paragraph 2. I mean, if we don't all have the similar ultimate objective, which is to treat our sewage to federal standards by 2020, then I honestly, I mean, I won't belabor it because we've got a long way to go in camera yet, but I don't understand that comment fully. The only really specific thing that is 10B, where on the public processes, and it says these public processes will be led by the municipality, and I would really prefer to see that they'll be led by the municipalities in conjunction with the CRD. I mean, for a smaller municipality, I think especially as ourselves, I mean, these could be major public hearings and major undertakings, and I think we would be, we would require and be glad to have the assistance of the CRD. So those are just some different comments.
This is our time to add to these terms of reference.
Okay,
and
well,
whatever.
I'd be happy
so if you would like
make
to
that
have
a motion that it be in conjunction with the CRD.
Well, then me next.
So that's under 10B.
Right.
Adding those words. Seconder for Mayor Screech's motion.
I'll second it then for discussion.
And discussion.
So who's going to be at these meetings? You're going to go into a process of going into Senator Victoria or View Royal. It actually is not a municipal. I thought we were paying CTERA $170,000. I think we're paying CRD staff. I think they all need to be there as part. This is a partnership with municipal, CRD, and our consultants. They all need to be there at these meetings when we're talking about that, much the same as what happened in Esquimalt. You had a lot of people there. A lot of people ask a lot of questions. So anyway, I think it should be added that any relevant staff that have information that is needed for the public has to be there at these meetings when we're talking about sites, because no site's going to be easy. We all know that. And I'm going to go back to, so are we just passing that motion on that? Because I want to talk about your financial thing too, because we talked about this at the last meeting. So
let's
pass
try and
the motion on this one to say
let's try and keep
add any. So you're saying CRD staff and or consultants as required as part of the process. Let's just get. Is that not correct?
Could I just go back to my motion? So,
Yeah.
I mean, I think what staff is referring to here specifically is the rezoning process, which would be a municipal jurisdiction. But what I'm saying is that I do feel it should be in conjunction with the CRD. So, I mean, I think that's all it needs to say is these public processes will be led by the municipalities in conjunction with the CRD.
And I'm adding and relevant consultants, because you're not going to go do a rezoning on a site until all of the consultants have done. Everybody's picked a site. Now you're going to go and do a rezoning in a municipality. You better have the background information as to where these things go. So just throw it in there.
I'm just looking if Mayor Screech is looking to accept a friendly amendment.
I think it's redundant, but sure.
Okay, so we're there and we have a seconder on that motion. Discussion on...
Thank you. I'm not understanding the motion, so I can't support it at this time because zoning process is the municipal responsibility. CRD will be making the application for the zoning. So you can't have CRD sitting on both sides of the table. It doesn't make sense.
No,
And so it can't be done in conjunction. Certainly CRD is part of the process, but they are the ones making the application.
Okay. So is it me or David?
You first and then follow up with David.
All we're talking about is when the rezoning application comes forward, that we have the staff there and the expertise to answer questions to the public. So all we're saying is we're adding to make sure that it's not the municipality saying yes or no on a sewage treatment without having, you need the background information, you need to have the staff there to support the process, for questions that are out there. They're not, the CRD isn't going to say, yes, we're going to want this rezoned based on these principles. It actually, the decision is made at the municipality. but we're trying to engage everybody here, so we want to make sure that there is a process before it comes to rezoning. There's going to be a big process before it comes to rezoning, so we just need to make sure all of the people show up. Right? It's not just the CRD coming in with an application and saying, we've done 6 months of process, we've picked this site, they go away with their consultants, then we're sitting here with the CRD and one rezoning and no backup. This is going to be almost a public hearing on public hearings, just basing on explaining the process of why you're having sewage treatment in your individual municipalities. If you don't get out of the gates properly, it'll fail. So I'm just saying I think what David, and I might be wrong, David, but I think it's important that we have all of the tools that we're paying for through our taxation, because you're paying for CTERA, you're paying for these consultants. You just make sure that they're part of our process. You ultimately make the decision, the city, but it still has to be it's going to be a big public process when we get to a single site.
Mayor Screech, did you have follow up on you're okay? We'll go to you, Beth.
Thank you, Chair. I think, with all due respect to CRD staff that is present, people feel cagey about the inclusion of CRD staff, and maybe there's a way within the motion to make it very clear that this process is being driven by both the east sides and the west sides, and that is not a small point.
I mean, I really don't want to belabor this, but this is a simple motion. I mean, the CRD is a huge part of the process. We're all in this together. As I've said countless times, we are all the CRD. The CRD is us, and we talk about the CRD like it's another body, which is ridiculous. If we go to public hearings, especially if there's one that ends up in View Royal, we will need the CRD's expertise there at the meetings. To suggest that we as View Royal have the capability to do that level of public hearing without the CRD's help and expertise is absurd. And that's all I'm asking, and it's really very minor wording. These public processes will be led by the municipalities in conjunction with the CRD. It's pretty simple. That's what I said.
Yeah.
And then I added consultants.
And Mary Young's applicable.
I thought everybody was happy with that.
Yeah.
So if we just call
So we're going to go back, call the question on that motion that's there. All those in favor? Opposed?
Good.
Motion carries. Moving on to next one, I heard conversation around budget items. Mayor Screech, did you have something further in another section? Or is that?
Well, he's already talked on it. I'm going to follow up on what he said because we've already had this discussion.
Well, carry on.
So we've always
orient us on here.
On baseline. Now, we talked about our costs. The actual requirement for sewage treatment is very basic and simple, secondary treatment. If we want to go above and beyond that, you better tell the public what that is. If you don't go, here's baseline secondary, as part of this process, and this is where it's really important. We had a presentation today for 10 minutes on it. These are things that may cost more money. If the public, through the process, agree that here's your baseline study. Say it's $788 million. Let's use that example for secondary treatment, nothing else extra. Then we want to do all this other green initiative stuff that goes along with what the public wants. You need to attach a price. $788, you want to do recovery of water, maybe that's $10 million, but maybe in the future that's money well spent. Let's do it now. You want to do waste recovery, or energy, create energy through any source of district energy or heat, or put it near a hospital where you actually have there's all these different ideas everybody has. The public's going to talk to you about it. You need to qualify the cost to go to those. So then the public can be supportive of, if it's $1.2 billion to do all this, or it's a base of $788. If it's still a base of $788, all those extras are on there, the public will decide, right? I think that's the process. So just do your baseline. I think, David, we've talked about this before at around here, that we don't cloud it with without putting cost to this stuff. So I'm done.
I just want to clarify, did you have a section of this report that you wanted to see that into?
He brought it up on budget. Well, so you need to attach something that says...
Well, it needs to be clear to staff.
So I'll do a motion then, if that's what you're asking. I thought his motion was fine. Make sure that you put an emphasis on budget, and to make sure what is the requirement for the grant funding, and what is the minimum requirement, and what's our cost, and then add the add-ons and let the public decide. So I don't know how to clarify that. It needs to be done by Larissa. We talked about this before. I think that was already, you've done some work on this already from 3 meetings ago where we said baseline and then do the add-ons and let the public be aware. I think that's, so if you can write it that way within this, if I can get a mover and seconder to do that.
Okay.
Okay, so we have a seconder on that motion to clarify the basic costs, and there we go. Okay.
Councillor?
We have a baseline. It is the current CRD plan at 783 with a plant at McLaughlin, 18 kilometers to Heartland. So as far as I'm concerned, that is the comparator. That is.
No.
What am I missing here?
Well,
That's
if you
gives secondary sewage treatment, federal regulations, and provides anaerobic digestion for the sludge. So I have always assumed in my mind that that is the baseline comparator. I just don't think we have to reinvent the wheel here.
Mayor Screech?
Thank you. I'm not sure of the exact wording for the motion. I know what Mayor Young is getting at, and it does concern me too. I mean, when we get into our next report, which is the round tables, where we had a very small amount of participants, really, and yet we're drawing conclusions of what the public wants from a very small number of people. And I share that concern, and I would like to see it referenced in here, that we do need a baseline. We need to be able to say to people, this is what secondary treatment is going to cost you, and this is what tertiary treatment is going to cost you, and et cetera. And I don't really see that reflected in here. I see that we have made the jump that resource recovery, et cetera, is the way we want to go, which may well be, and I hope it is, but we haven't put the financial checks and measures to make sure that we're also delivering best financial value to an already strapped taxpayer. And I think that's what the point Director Young is trying to make, and we need to reflect in a motion somehow. Thank you.
Can I ask you, Mayor Screech, to look on page 3 of 11, under background, third paragraph, where it says, phase 2 of this process will be a feasibility and costing analysis carried out by the consultant of the preferred wastewater treatment system solution sets to determine the regulatory requirements and compare the costs against the existing overall funding envelope of $788 million. Does that clarification? No, but is like, can we expand it in that section so that we have it clearly identified where it's going to show up?
So let me talk, because I'm gonna deconfuse everybody here. You do not want to use McLaughlin as your baseline. It's not a site right now that we're using. We need a new site. We're here to pick a new site. We really don't have a baseline. So I want to just clarify that. You're going to confuse the public if you keep I'm telling the CRD, don't use McLaughlin anymore. Those numbers are out the door. We're not pumping for $200 million to Heartland. Those things are out the door. What we need to do is, as we go through the process and we pick our site, what's your baseline at that site for the grant the case that we've applied for? Then we say, oh, and if you want wastewater recovery, we do this, we want that. I have to bring this down, simple, basic knowledge. So in that, if you can phrase exactly what David is saying, Larissa, you've got this. I think we have a motion 3 meetings ago. We talked in depth on this, and there is a motion that was put forward by, I think, me and David at that time, where we said, make sure that we tell the public, here's what you get with your grant, here's what we talked about 5 years ago, here's where we're going. Now we're in the public consultation process. The public, a minority of the public who has not been, is engaged. The majority have to make the decision on the costs. So we need to make sure that it says, here's our new baseline. I'm going to get your new site. We're not going to go backwards. 788, I don't believe, okay? We all don't believe that. So we need to get a new baseline on the new site, add the other stuffs, and then tick it off if the public says yes. Like we have our public meetings based on, do you want this, 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 and this? They might go, no, 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 and you're back to your basic. And then so I guess that's my point. So I don't know how to get that. We did it.
Can you find that to bring forward to the
add it now.
Or one?
Add it now. just add it to that stage.
Well, I'm not sure she's got the words on there.
Well, I'll tell you what the words are then. So what it is that we look at a baseline cost of the new site, and that we make sure that any additional costs for tertiary or any other things are identified when we move to the next site, so that it's very clear where we're going. Okay, because that's the confusing part to everybody. We keep bringing, I'm worried about bringing up McLaughlin. I just don't want to hear it no more. Okay. So add it.
Wording along the lines of business cases will be developed and cost comparisons will be shown for different levels of treatment.
Perfect. Okay.
Something like that?
That's
just as an amendment to that background paragraph?
Okay.
So is that 2 point whatever?
So we're making a motion there, and do we have something already on
Larissa
the
get
table?
that?
Can I just have that read back?
I don't know that I can read it.
Okay.
I just sort of wung it.
Sure.
Yes, exactly. Thanks, Ange.
Thanks.
Baseline starting point.
That works it? Okay, says the same thing.
Yeah, but and then can I really clarify to say anything extra is identified by price in the process? Because you can't keep talking about the fluffy stuff if we don't put a price to it. That's all. So make sure that we just don't give the baseline of secondary and then don't say what this other stuff will cost. Okay, it has to be part of the whole open public agenda stuff. Okay,
Councillor, do you have anything specific on that?
we're all good.
Yeah, I just didn't know if it was important to once and for all put McLaughlin and Heartland to rest, because although we have, and I've been part of those discussions, it does surface, and is there a way to embed that in the motion that the baseline is fresh, new from this point forward? Could someone...
At this point, we do have two alternatives for residuals treatment. One is to have that accommodated at the wastewater treatment sites, the other being at a centralized facility at Heartland, as outlined in our liquid waste management plan. So there's lots of implications with removing those sites and moving away from our liquid waste management plan before we have a new plan. So I know that's been discussed a number of times. I don't think today or in this moment is really the most appropriate time to really tackle that one. And that's how, just coming back to Heartland, that's where Heartland fits into this as an option.
So it sounds like there's two levels. One is the public face, where we want to have a new baseline going forward, but in order to not get hung up on losing funding because we have these holes in our agreements, there's this thing happening behind where we have to have these placeholders. Is that correct?
We also have a transitional authorization to discharge. So under the Federal Fisheries Act, we should have secondary treatment in right now. The only reason why we don't, and the only reason why we're permitted not to, is because we've put in a plan that will transition us to a new plan that actually speaks to the approved liquid waste management plan. So,
Call the question on the motion. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. And Mayor Desjardins?
I would also like to move that we forward and include the appendix regarding the CAO's timeline to the Core Area Liquid Waste Management Committee.
Discussion?
So are we saying that it's September 30th, we have to be all done public consulting and everything else? Is that your concern, your CAO's concern, they're telling you that they can't do it by September 30th? We're not what is happening with, what's wrong with July and August with our staff? Or I need to know why we're not doing much public consultation in July and August. If the deadline is...
Speak to the experience.
No, I know that, but what I'm saying is that they're telling you that September 30th is not acceptable. They cannot meet that deadline, and we're saying we're not going to meet in July and August. So I guess maybe to move the process, what is the timeline that the CAOs want that they think they can meet? Because here we are again pushing, and we're going to lose stuff. So let's get a real timeline, and then we just have to work within it. Go ahead.
Well, our understanding from the terms of reference, and we stand to be corrected, is that the report, the final report, has to be submitted by the end of September, and that there is a public consultation component to this particular costing and feasibility study. We've managed to clarify, I think, with the CRD, the limited nature and extent of any consultation over the July-August period. We have a lot of concerns about that, and I think they're shared by many of you. Our question, I think, more relates to the month of September, because if we understand this correctly, essentially the report has to be completed by the end of September and into the CRD, and before the board, I think, the 15th of October. Our concern is that that's a very, very constrained time to do public consultation in September, essentially after Labor Day. You got 3 weeks. And we would question the optics of doing that in September when the public probably knows full well that the report has to be submitted by the end of September. It's essentially almost completed. Yet you're doing public consultation in September to further provide feedback and input into the drafting of the report. We think it's counterintuitive. Now, if that's not the process that's been envisaged, we stand to be corrected. But as we understand and read the terms of reference.
Know that. So I've asked the question. I just need to know, what can we do to, what is your, okay, here, I'll rephrase the question. What date timeline do you think you can meet that's realistic for us to have a public process and deliver the criteria? If you don't have to deliver it to the CRD until the 15th of October, why can't you deliver it on the 10th? Is that a problem? Because they're part of the process anyway, are they not, what you guys are doing?
Yeah, through the chair, if we look at the proposed work plan, the purpose of this engineering and financial analysis is to get the information that we need, that we would then go out and do consultation in the fall so that folks can see, well, this is the baseline, this is what that's going to cost, these are what the add-ons are going to cost. It's actually going to take us all the way through into September to actually finish that technical work. So after September, the core area committee will say, okay, let's take a look at these options, and we'll do another consultation process in October and November that will lead and help us work through to a preferred option that we would move into a plan amendment at the end of the year. So I think we do have time to do consultation in the fall, coming out of the detailed options analysis that's going to be taking place over the summer. It will be very difficult as this work is underway to consult with financial and engineering options that haven't been fully worked up. So that's why it actually works with July and August having no intense public consultation.
So you just updates maybe, but as you said, so we're on updates, so I'm just clarifying.
Yep.
Updates are going to the public anyway, so we're working. It's not like we're on holidays for 60 days, so the public gets all concerned, and then we ram something on September. You show up and everything's done and moved and approved. That will be a problem. So
remember, options are coming out of this report, and then decisions will have to be made that the public will be consulted on.
Okay. I'm just asking, what timeline do you require? It's September 30th, isn't it? When is it?
Might have some input here from Christine.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
So I think as we look at the concern was, and Mr. Nason or the other CAOs can correct me, was that a final report would be delivered with the solution without additional public input coming on board to be able to have that conversation. So I think in just the conversations we've been having subsequent to that there is the ability for us to have that further conversation as we move forward, understanding that some of the timelines may have to be adjusted based on things that are unforeseen in what is a moving object. And you're absolutely right, we don't intend on going dormant over the summer, but to be not as to be able to provide updates in that. And also one of the updates I think that the public engagement team on the Westside would like to do is to be able to craft what the public engagement post-summer looks like and update the public and get them further engaged and more people engaged based on the input we've had to date. So we also need some time to be able to plan and put that together and then for lack of a better word, advertise it out there in the world so that coming September, October, as we move forward with what the technical team comes together, working together, we have a really comprehensive public engagement program. Is that, I just want to leave it up to the CAOs to see if they want to add or correct.
Well, my concern is we're going to be public engagement and then right into decision making and process, and the public might get pissed at that. So, and I know they will. So let's just go back to we'll set the September 30th, but then you guys will have to come back to us and say, this is not acceptable, we can't do it. Like, we're going to have this as a moving target. Is that, like, how do you say September 30th? They're not prepared. They're not going to go out anyway. Am I correct?
So including the appendix of the CAO's information allows the core area to have this concern as they're making decisions around the terms of reference. There is an opportunity here because Westside has a slightly different terms of reference, which is we need to take ours to a conceptual plan. It's different than Eastside. There may be an opportunity through these terms of reference and follow-up that the technical group will work with Eastside earlier than Westside as we complete our process into a longer timeline. But that's why I want to include this at the discussions tomorrow so that the full committee has the opportunity to see that there could be variation here and that there are concerns from our staff.
Okay.
So I'm not sure, Angela, did you get a seconder on?
Yeah, David.
Okay, so any further conversation around the motion to include the CAO's timeline into the discussion for tomorrow? Call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carried.
The motion was to include in our changes and terms of reference going forward, to include the Appendix C, which is the Westside CAO's critical path with key initiatives and roles.
So that's the full meal deal, changes and everything. We're all good? Next item, folks, we're really kind of pushing the envelope here. Solutions Westside Roundtable. All those, our discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. Next item, Westside Solutions Budget Update. Discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. East Side's already been done. Correspondence. There was a letter from Mayor Young in regards to the Craig Flower pump station. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. There's the follow-up response to that letter from the CRD. Item 6.2.
Is there a second?
I'm waiting for one.
I'll second it for discussion.
Discussion?
The Craig Flower Pump Station, that's not part of the STU, not part of the funding.
Yes, it is.
Oh, it is part.
It is part of the CTERA program.
Part
Yep.
of it. That is the only thing that is part of the funding right now that you're working on at the CRD, or is there something?
There's another minor project, the design for the Harrow Woods attenuation tank. Those were the two projects that moved forward, although CTERA was paused.
Right. So our share, or the share to the CRD on it is a $12.5 million project. The reason why I'm asking is because you've responded, and that's good, and I'll send it off. When you're talking about the Craig Flower, you gave me 3 months of cost, January to 2015, program management, CTERA program. Of that that's $426,000 CTERA gets paid, or is that correct, for those 3-4 months for Craig Flower Pump Station?
That's all in. So that we're moving now to your question around the monthly expenditure for CTERA, and we've noted there, and Raj certainly can jump in here. He prepared this letter from $170,000 per month down to $114,000, and so I think what he was intending to do there was just give you a breakdown of how that's been spent.
One part of my question that's not answered is what is the cost of the pump station? It was $12 million. Now it's at $13.9. What amount of that is the CTERA cost? The total Citerra cost. I'm confused with you've gave me a thing on the bottom here that only shows January to April. Does that mean that in that Citerra cost or the pump station that you're only taking January to? I'm confused as to timelines here because it was started in 2014. Can you just explain to me how much you've paid Emterra to do a $13 or $12 million pump station?
So through you, Madam Chair, if I'm understanding this correctly, are you asking how much of that, the bottom table, that costs relate to Craig Flower?
Go to your top table. Permits in hydro, you've got your budget is now 13.935. Construction, engineering, contingency. Where is Emterra in this? Citerra in this budget.
Those costs are specifically related to Craig Flower. So, I'm sorry, I'm not understanding your question there.
Emterra is doing, Citerra is doing Craig Flower Pump Station and another project.
That's
Those
correct.
are the only two things that Citerra has been working on in the last year since you put them on pause.
So Raj,
$126,000 has been paid from January. That's only 3-4 months. 426,000 of that 426. What is that for? And I'm trying to figure out the question that I'm having to answer is when we talk about the two projects that Citerra is doing. What is it that we're paying Citerra to do these projects for the last year and a half? Because I don't see that in that budget. So it's not a $12 million. Is it really $30 million? Where did the $30 million come from? Is it because we've spent all this other money on it?
through the chair, the $30 million for Craig Flower, I think, was a miscalculation or was an error on behalf of people reporting that in the media.
Okay,
So these are the.
I don't have that. No, the media didn't report it. It's been talked about at the CRD. So I guess my point is, where is the allocation of funds from Citerra on this pump station? That was one of my questions, so I need that answered.
Raj,
How do you allocate? You're paying somebody to do taxpayers' money to do a project for us, to build a pump station and another minor project. What are we paying? How much have they made for that project? Because I don't know what the $426,000 for 3 months would be if it's not part of this, and this is an add-on to this 13.935.
The $426,000 is the cost to keep the PMO status in the suspended, since the program was paused. That is the cost for the PMO to keep it running in that downward operation mode. That's the
so
cost.
Raj, could you just let the select committee know, does any of that $114,000 a month, is that included in engineering, legal, and other, or is that over and above?
The common costs are for the entire Citerra program. The common costs, as we explain in the paragraph just above that bottom table, those common costs are not specifically related to Craig Flower. That is associated with the whole Citerra program. Does that help?
Yeah. Well, I understand this because I'm confused that we're paying a contractor $426,000 in 4 months, basically for 2 small projects. I'm trying to figure out where's our cost? How are we allocating our cost, taxpayers' money, to a Craig Flower pump station? That I'm not getting the answer that I want. What is the cost of Citerra? What are they billing us for as part of this cost for here? I'm confused that we'd be paying $426,000 for something on pause, and yet I'm not getting broken down what that 426 is. Is that 426 the common, and then there's another charge that is getting with consultants and everybody else and engineering on top of this 13.935?
The 426 includes all the consultants and everything that's part of the overall Citerra program.
Okay. All right. I just need this question answered. There's a budget to build a $12 million plant. I want to know how much has been paid to Citerra since that thing was started 3 years ago. There must have been an allocation because it says that any projects that Citerra do, right, that they're fully in charge of it, right? Like they're fully in charge of Craig Flower. When I asked the question at one of our previous meetings, somebody said that you're paying Citerra to do. I said, what are you paying them $170,000 for? You guys responded by saying, we're paying them $170,000 because they're doing Craigflower Pump Station and this other thing. I'm confused that now we're saying the $170,000 is down to 106. Is that correct? There's no other cost that you're paying CTERA above this 106 then. So that means that the 106 includes doing the management of that. So I just need to know, what is the cost of that 106? What is the management cost? Why is that not put into here? Because there's a cost to construction. Langford has built pump stations. I know exactly.
Point of order, Chair.
So I just need to know what that number is.
Can we come back to the motion, and can this be taken offline to get further clarity, please?
Yeah, I wanted a response. I now have to respond to somebody. I don't have the answer. I need to know what the Antera cost is, what has been allocated. I guess I need a breakdown of what this actual pump station costs. Okay, that's all.
Call the question,
and
Chair.
You're missing the construction part.
Call the question then on the motion before us. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carried.
Chair, I'd like to try and help this situation out by the fact is that when we receive the reports from CTERA, they have not broken out Craigflower separate of conveyance. And that's the confusion from what I can understand. So I would like to make a motion that Westside Committee recommend to Core Area Liquid Waste to request specific costing of project components for Craigflower so that it is separated out in the future for clarity.
That's a motion. I need a seconder.
I'll second that.
Mayor?
I'm going to vote against the motion. I mean, A, I'd just like to draw our attention to the clock, and we have a long in camera, and some of us simply have to leave. B, I made the point last meeting, which everybody ignored. This is outside of the scope of the terms of reference of our committee. It's completely outside. If you go back and read the terms of reference, it is not our mandate to be cross-examining the CTERA budgets of the Core Area Liquid Waste Committee. That is their mandate. And, I think we're just wasting a lot of time going over things where we could hopefully be making valuable progress forward on other items.
Mayor?
Chair, this motion really tries to help provide clarity for all members around this table, because some of them are not down at CRD and at the core area, and we need to remember that. So providing clear information helps with that process. Thank you.
Call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. 6.3, correspondence from Watkins Way, Waste Management and Agricultural Strategy, May 21st.
I would move we receive this and send this to Eastside Committee, please.
Didn't Eastside get it?
I don't know.
Should it go to core?
It needs to be referred somewhere. It's not in our jurisdiction. So whether it goes to core or it goes to Eastside.
Well, it should go to Eastside.
Okay.
So
all right.
just send
So that's my motion.
Eastside, we have a mover, seconder, please.
I'll move it.
You'll be seconding. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. That concludes. We have nothing under new business. Motion to close the meeting.
Second.
All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carried.
I would ask for a motion to include Chief Andy in the in camera.
Yeah. We have and a seconder there. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. Chief, you're welcome to stay and participate in the next.